and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
All right, let's fix this first. Perhaps a bit like that. So, hi, people. How you doing? It's the 29th of August, 2015. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur event. I'm your host Walter, coming to you from the Netherlands, where it's 4 p.m. on a wonderful sunny day. It's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, good morning, good day, wherever you are. Today I'm supposed to get a phone call. I've been informed that the phones have been forwarded, and let's see, what's the phone number? Hold on, guys. Wonderful sunny. There we go. The number is 178. It's 1-718-717-8296. So the 1 is for the United States. I guess most of people listening can exclude that. 781-787-8296. If you want to join the conversation, you can also Skype me at Solvinur. That's Solvinur. And we can drag you in. Let's see. There we go. Hello, caller.
Hello, Walter. Good morning.
Good day, buddy.
All right.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Hopefully we're not going to have any snafus here because I'm calling in by phone. My computer speed is just far too slow to carry too much, I guess. So we tried a little bit last week.
Yeah.
And so today I'm going to put myself up for grilling for you. Let you grill me some. And
easy.
You know, comparing Trivium.
Let me.
I'm sorry, Walter.
Yeah, no problem. Don't worry about it. Let me welcome the people in the chat first, and then let's see what we can do. Right?
You bet.
There are people in the chat room. You can go there if you go to ucy.tv and find the chat link. It's Captain Gringo who's there. Cracker, hey, what's up, buddy? Grump is there. Hopper, Joe, Jules is there even twice. Otto is there. Tomato, hey. Ufde, or something like that. I don't know exactly how that's supposed to be pronounced. Victory Through Vegetables, and Mr. V, who's also there twice. Yay! Welcome, everybody.
Woo-hoo. Howdy do, everybody. And we are live, and big shout out over to World Truth. I hope we'll have some folks joining us from World Truth, World Liberty Media. There's Otto joined us. Now, like I said, last week we tried to talk, and the connection was so bad, but so now we're in by phone, and it's what I'd like to do is kind of compare a little bit as far as applying what may be called by some nonviolent communication when using that with the Trivium.
Yeah.
I'd like I'd like to start out by saying that I've kind of evolved in this direction for the last few years, and I'd like to go back a few years. Now, a friend that I went to school with, I had posted this picture. It was the one with the gal holding their baby, the soldier coming back from the Mideast and holding their baby, and it talked about leaving dead babies over there in ditches, and so it was kind of a generalization, kind of a review in a sense of the paradigm today. So what I found was, at that point in time, how emotional our viewpoints are of the world.
Yes.
Now,
well, the viewpoints are influenced by emotion.
yes.
Yes.
Now, I've done a lot of review this week, and I don't want to, go to reading what other people have wrote, but I would like to make mention of a few people. Brett Vanat, School Subs Project, Daryl Becker, Voluntary Visions, and I had the chance to reconnect with a few folks and connect with a few more.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I said you said you had the chance to connect with him, and I said okay.
Okay. See, now that's even just sometimes our inflection in speech tells a lot. And listening to Daryl Becker, I did a lot of that, and I found him in a lot of places and met a couple of new people by searching his name and finding out some about what he has to talk about.
Uh-huh.
Now, I told him I was going to quote him, and he dropped me this into inbox. He says, right on, and that was in talking about some of my comments. But anyways, it says, thanks, Vincent. I'll check your stuff out very soon. So I tagged a few folks there, and now Daryl's out in Hawaii, so it's 4 a.m. There's 12 hours difference between you and him.
Uh-huh.
There, so I hope another fellow's going to come in. I'll get to him in a minute. That he might call us a little bit later.
Okay.
And he's one of the guys I discovered. But anyways, so Daryl says he prefers to emphasize that it's a set of methods. Talking about NVC. And unfortunately, it's a set of methods, or I think idioms was not idioms, maybe ideologues. Anyways, that is a word that could be used. And unfortunately, he says, as with many successful methods, certain people out there will worship the method. The inventor of the NVC, Rosenberg, talking about, as far as a lot of people ascribe and almost make a religion out of stuff. And indeed, with the trivium method, some people almost take that to the point of, as Kira Young said from the Bridge, she has a radio show, and she interviewed Daryl, which was one of the best interviews that I really did find with Daryl Becker.
Yeah.
So anyways, they say, he goes on to say, before coming to a firm conclusion about a tool, it seems rational to be able to know the tool, and NVC is certainly a tool to create international and interpersonal harmony, or the opposite if misused. Missing the trivium and organizational tools, novice use of NVC can often be weak, in his opinion. When someone says they don't like NVC...
Vince?
Yes, sir?
Novice and then? I couldn't...
Yes, look. Okay, I'll back up just a second. He says...
Sure. Thanks, buddy.
When someone says they don't like the NVC, it's similar to them saying that they don't like guns. Wait a minute, go back far enough.
Novice.
Before coming...
That's where I lost you. It's my understanding of the English that's bugging, huh?
Okay, so he says before coming to a firm conclusion about a tool, it seems rational to be able to know what that tool is. And NVC is certainly a tool to create harmony, or the opposite of misused.
Uh-huh.
Missing the trivium and organizational tools, novice use of NVC can often be weak. And in his opinion, when someone says they don't like NVC, it's similar to them saying they don't like guns.
Okay.
Like they had a bad experience.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, anyways, find Daryl. He's a lot of places. Daryl Becker, School Sex Project. His main site is Voluntary Visions, and you can find practical definitions there by going to his site. I did take a few notes. I'll have to grab them here in a minute. But Daryl is a acupuncturist, which, if I remember what I wrote over there, I thought that was kind of a little ironic. He knows exactly where to frickin' poke.
Yeah.
I found him to be very, very intelligent, and by searching his name, also Tragedy and Hope, and he dropped a few links, which don't fallacy me, bro.
Yeah, it's a nice one. Yeah. It's a kind of a game, right?
It's a kind of what?
Game.
Yeah, there's that, and there was another one he talked about, which was a fallacy a day.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, on the Trivium, you can find Tragedy and Hope. It's a 5-page summary.
Yeah.
Now, Daryl was, and a couple other guys, they had been reviewed, and I'll use that word loosely, by some fellows over there. I believe they're on Tragedy and Hope. And was it, Jan Irving, I think, took part of that. So there is a divide, in a sense, I guess, because of this strict definition of NVC. And as Daryl said, it's more of a method. Now, let me go back to where I was saying about this post. Now, I found a lot of emotion, and it was really, for me, an awakening about how I speak and how I interact with people. Because for me, this NVC is not a religion or something a school of thought that I adhere to, but take the application, which is to be able to communicate, and that's what I've titled our broadcast today: More Effective Communication. So, when you care to have a discussion with somebody, most people in this world have no idea of the Trivium method to take the language, the grammar, which who, what, where, and when, and then come to the why, and then finally to the how.
Correct.
So you and I we're not setting any borders as far as our conversation, because you and I both have an understanding that hey, you can't piss me off, you can't insult me, and you and I are actually just reflecting upon this information that we have to use as a tool.
Yeah.
Now, you can, of course, find more on the Trivium and the definitions. The Trivium, now I blank. Just do a search, use your search engine, and you'll find a lot from Tragedy and Hope, Trivium. And now, Chris Stefanick, he's at Choice Conversations, and hopefully he's going to be calling in. And a very good podcast I listened to them was Judgment and Responsibility with Daryl Becker and Wes Bertrand. And in this conversation, they tackle the topics of judgment and responsibility. And I found that these two things were like a denial of responsibility, as is often the case, often go together. And they discuss how these topics handled using nonviolent communication go over many examples.
Vince.
Yes, sir.
You're going too fast for me. You said judgment, responsibility, and denial. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of summed up in the 4 Ds.
The 4 Ds?
Yeah, which is...
Judgment spelled with a J, right?
Yes, judgment. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop this one open. The 4 Ds are one, diagnostic, I can't say it.
Diagnostics, yeah.
Okay, diagnoses. Denial of responsibility for our own feelings and actions is number 2.
Yeah.
Demands is number 3, and deserve-oriented language I will grab this here and
What was that? Deserve-oriented language?
yeah, deserve-oriented language.
How do I put
what I
those
can-
three words together in one sentence? I don't understand. How do you
Well,
deserve-oriented language? This doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, well, deserve, then hyphen, deserve in parentheses, hyphen, which is oriented language. So since I'm there, then I'll just go ahead and read just a little. We were taught from an early age that bad people deserve punishment and good people deserve reward. Sadly, this has been used to control and manipulate us for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
It has been reinforced even in cartoons where the hero, Superman or Spider-Man, managed to beat up the bad guy. Pow!
Mm-hmm.
Boom! Pow! Boom! As a sign that justice has been served. So I dropped that there if anybody want to open that up. They're welcome to read that. Like I said, I'm not wanting really to do a lot of reading of other people's work, only give a mention, but have a discussion between you and I, and Kenneth, like I said, let you rake me over the coals some. Now, you say, as do others, that NBC and the trivia method do not, they don't coincide, right?
Well, let's first start with some definitions here. When you say non-violent communication, what's the definition of violent?
Okay, good question, because last week, now here's my chance. I'm going to drag you just a little bit across the coast. Last week, you said that waking up is a very violent act.
Absolutely.
Now, as for me, I was kind of just, it wasn't violent to me. There was a certain amount of violence, going back to that post I talked about that female soldier, but I guess been becoming aware of how the world works over the past. Sorry, I got distracted. Don't talk about Oklahoma auto too. But I came about an awareness of how the world works gradually.
Yeah.
I have to credit you actually with the discovery of the trivia method after you coming here to UCY. So I consider you somebody that I look up to. I don't consider myself so much smarter than anybody else, as much as I find credibility in the fact that I know so many smart people and subscribe to so many views and looking. Now, when I started out in 2011 and I discovered the internet, right? So basically, I went out there to change the world, and as time progressed, I found that actually I was more changed than any change that I had affected. And I kind of evolved along to where, in my search, or what I like to call my voyage here.
Yeah, it is a voyage.
I went and I purposely sought out as many people with opposing ideas other than what I had. And I kind of took a look at the whole of what is and is the way I like to say it, or how Anthony likes to say it. And in the end, I discovered that, we have so many similarities in what we want in this world. But when we try to express it, it comes out so many times of what was instilled into us from our infancy, from our parents and those and our peers, and most certainly the propaganda machine that kind of guides and directs the world today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, back to the violent part. So, as far as nonviolent communication, it's more of like non-aggression. I probably ought to grab my notes here on that. What we want to do is be able to communicate with one another, and violence is often met with resistance. So, I keep reading chat and laughing. Sorry.
All right, so you would rather use the word aggression?
Non-aggression, yeah, I think that's a good word.
Okay, so there's a problem right there, right? If the term is non-violent communication, then we should discuss that. if you're going to change the terms, then we're talking about something else, right?
Well, when we go back to grammar,
but Vince, hold on. Yeah, you pay victory through vegetable pasted something, and just to be thorough here, I should read this on air. You got a minute?
Okay. You bet. I got all the time in the world.
And we were taught from an early age that bad people deserve punishment and that good people deserve reward. Sadly, this has been used to control and manipulate us for centuries. Alright, so the first thing I would like to say about that is that there is no mention here of what is bad and what is good, right? So as a philosopher, I'm going to mention that those topics belong to ethics and morals, right? And that's the third step in building a philosophical view. The first step is your metaphysics, in other words, what's the nature of reality. The second step is epistemology, which means how do you know what you know? And based on those two, so depending on those two, which can differ from person to person, you derive a kind of morality, right? So somebody that is, for instance, has in his metaphysics, is in how he views the world, has the idea that there must be a God, will have different morals than somebody who thinks that there is no God, right? So that's one thing I wanted to mention about that. Let me continue here. It has been reinforced even in cartoons, where the hero managed to beat up the bad guy as a sign that justice has been served. Now that word justice is also worth mentioning. It comes from the Emperor Justine, who was a very wicked, ruthless emperor, right? I know as I was growing up, this form of justice was propagated with cartoons like the Justice League, where the team of good guys were searching for ways to stop the bad guys by beating them up. The hero, of course, was given the reward like a key to the city. Such language, right, so such, I don't know what that's supposed to refer to, the word such. What language is he talking about here? Such language,
that specific language being described.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Do they mean with such language the idea of good and bad? Or what?
Well, now you said a minute ago that a person that believes in God and another that doesn't would have a different idea of what's good and bad.
Yes.
And that's true to an extent, I'd say. But, you don't have to believe in God to have, ethics, to, to have good morals.
Sure, no, I agree.
Okay.
Let me continue. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You go ahead, Walter.
Such language does more than disconnect us. It helps to maintain the culture of violence against anyone we deem bad. Alright, so I got a lot of trouble with this sentence. Such language does more than disconnect us. What are they talking about? Are they talking about the idea that good people deserve good and bad people deserve bad? Is that what they're talking about?
Yes, that's what that right there is specifically saying. Like the superhero Superman or Spider-Man, as it was saying.
Okay,
and that came from that link I dropped earlier. And
yeah, so I would then say such ideas do more than disconnect us, right? This has nothing to do with language, in my opinion, anyway. A language is a tool that everybody uses to communicate. It is a tool to bring across ideas, right? Language in itself is a tool which can be used for good or bad. So, I'm kind of having trouble with this sentence here. It helps to maintain the culture of violence against anyone we deem bad. Right?
Yeah, that would probably could be best described as somebody that would say, and not entirely, but somebody that believes in the death penalty. Okay, somebody kills somebody that should be killed. That eye for an eye type deal, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to take that to let's examine Saudi Arabia and their policies of beheading more people and killing people, chopping their hands off and stuff, and in the name of their idea of what religion is or their idea of what God would have them to do.
We have another caller, Vince. Hi, caller. Welcome.
Hey, this is Chris Stefanick from the Choice Conversations podcast.
Hi.
Who am I talking with?
Chris.
Hey.
Welcome. I'm glad you could call.
Oh, thanks. Is this Vincent?
This is Vincent, and Walter is the host of the show, Solvinur event, and he is over in the Netherlands. And I invited you to call in, and I'm very glad that you could.
All right.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Just out. Got back from walking the dog. It's a beautiful morning here in North Carolina in the United States, and enjoying my life, making the most of it.
All right.
Awesome.
Let me finish this and then we can talk, all right?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Much like the number one at the top of this list, deserved language consists of moralistic judgments that determine who should get what. We call others good, bad, right, wrong, sinful, righteous, or even holy. I am reminded of the famous quote by the philosopher Rumi, who said, "Out beyond the fields of wrongness and rightness there is a place. I'll meet you there." When we are only telling people what we think they deserve, it is unlikely we will have connected with them on a needs level that gets our needs met. It is also unlikely we will be able to help meet their needs. Alright, so I've got a problem with the word needs here. What we need is food, water, shelter, fire, things like that, right?
Physical needs.
Yeah, to survive. I hope that this is a good start at getting you to think about the different words you use to connect with others. Alright, so first of all, I'm not using words to connect with others, I'm using words to bring across ideas. If you are speaking or writing and hoping you will motivate others into action, these are some things to consider, especially as we approach the holidays and many of us will spend time with our families. It might be better to rethink telling Aunt Miriam how she is too needy, or telling Uncle Frank how he has to sit. I'm sorry, it must be a typo. At the kids' table. Uncle Frank must be sitting at the kids' table. It is amazing how language changes the connection we try to make with others. We have choices. We can choose language that connects us or language that builds walls between us. And the needs that met, we would make life more wonderful for all of us. Right, so I've got a bit of trouble with all of this, guys. But I'm sorry, caller. What's your name?
My name is Chris Stefanick. I'm the host of the Choice Conversations podcast.
Christopher?
So I've talked about nonviolent communication or connected communication.
Yeah.
Extensively on my show. I've had on guests like Daryl Becker and Wes Bertrand and quite a number of other people.
All right, so Christopher, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Chris is fine.
The name of your podcast, please, slowly, so people can hear.
Sure, it's Choice Conversations. So the idea there is, hopefully there's a double meaning, so hopefully the shows are of high quality, so they're choice conversations. But also, my show is very much about freedom and liberty in all aspects of your life. And I touch on all, how freedom affects everything in the world, including the political sphere and all of that. But my focus is much more so on personal freedom and how you can bring freedom into your life.
All right. So can I ask you, because I asked Vince and I didn't really get a straight answer. When using the term non-violent communication, what's the definition of violent?
Well, I know a lot of people have a problem with that definition. So, because typically violence refers to physical violence, physical aggression towards another, which is not how it's being used when Marshall Rosenberg, coined the term nonviolent communication. So, we could sit here and we could debate the semantics of what violence is, or we could look at what the spirit of the word is.
Yeah.
And in this case, the spirit of it is not meaning physical violence like communication that punches you in the face, but one that is, I would say, aggressive, one that is ineffective, one that's not about connection with the person across from you.
Okay.
Much more about disconnection and building walls than it is building bridges.
Okay. And so would you say that if we are, let's say you and I are talking about a specific subject, and you are using different definitions with words than I do, that would mean a disconnect. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. What was it? Aristotle who said that? It was not Aristotle. I believe it was Socrates who said, if you were to be wise, first define your terms.
Uh-huh.
So you want to make sure that when you're talking with someone, you're talking about the same things.
Yes.
And because, basically all words have multiple meanings, you'd be hard-pressed to find any words that don't have more than one definition if you go look them up in the dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the definitions can vary widely. It's important to make sure you're talking about the same things, especially if you're getting into a debate with someone or it's a heated argument. Quite often you find that you're not actually arguing the same things because there's subtle differences between the words. And once you come to terms, once you state your definitions for what it is you're talking about, you're like, oh, actually, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was just using that term differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that too also with the people I talk to here in the Netherlands. They're disagreeing with me through like half an hour of a conversation. And then we start defining the terms, and they say, "Oh, that's what you mean."
Yes. Yeah. One great way that you can get around that, or at least it helps, is when you're in a discussion with somebody, if you could ask them to say, I really find this conversation with you important, and because of that, I want to make sure that we're talking about the same things. Would you mind repeating back to me what you think you heard me say? Could you confirm what you heard me say? And some people will find that annoying. If you're in the middle of a heated debate, they might find that annoying.
Yeah.
And it might make them more aggressive. But hopefully if you're talking calmly among friends, people are usually willing to oblige you on that, and then that can clear that up a lot of times.
All right. So Vincent wanted to talk to me about the connections or disconnections, if there are, between non-aggressive communication and the trivium. I'm assuming you know a little bit about the trivium. Is that correct, Christopher?
I have, yes. I've had a few shows on my podcast about the trivium. So Gino Denning's been a guest several times. Daryl Becker has talked about the trivium on my show. And in fact, back before I was the host, it used to be called Two Beers with Steve a few years back.
Yeah.
Ran by a great guy named Steve Patterson. He actually had on Jan Irving.
Yeah.
Which anybody who's done a search for the trivium online and managed to get past all of the heavy metal music has probably found Jan Irving. So, but yeah, so there's I'm familiar with the trivium. That was a long way of saying yes.
Okay. So I'm kind of new to this nonviolent communication, right? But
Sure.
what I've gathered from it up to now is that when you're speaking to somebody, you are actually taking into account their emotions. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say you want to be aware of emotions, both internally and of those that you're speaking with.
Yeah.
So you don't want to assume you know what the emotions the other person is feeling. So, like in nonviolent communication, you would ask the other person. They have specific ways that you can ask them, but you would say, "Gee, I'm sensing that you're a little frustrated. Is that because your need for understanding isn't being met? That sort of thing." You wouldn't just assume you're like, "Oh, you're really frustrated," and that would be called a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
If you just label them without asking them about that, which is one of the things that is not encouraged in nonviolent communication.
All right, so that's one of the first D's, right? Diagnosis?
Correct.
All right, so when comparing this to the trivium, I would say it doesn't really match, because when using the trivium, you try to avoid letting your thoughts get influenced by emotions, right?
Well, I mean, there is the logic aspect, which people often say that the opposite of being logical is being emotional.
Well,
I kind of disagree with that. I would say the opposite of being logical is being illogical.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And it is the case that some people, when their emotions get elevated, the fight or flight mechanism, in their brains come on, and reason turns off.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from, where this thinking that emotions are the opposite of reason, being emotional. So I personally think that someone who has a tremendous degree of self-awareness, who has done work on themselves, and there's a variety of ways of doing that, being things like journaling, things like meditation, etc. You can learn to use your emotions. I mean, I think emotions are part of the human experience.
Yes.
So, one part of the trivium is grammar, which in the way that grammar is defined in the trivium, it is essentially input. One of the inputs that we all experience, pretty much, as far as I can tell, pretty much at all points in your life, is the emotions you're experiencing. So that is, to me, I think to remove emotion from the trivium is to remove an input. That's to say, I'm not going to acknowledge one of my inputs. And I think that when you do that, whenever you pick any input, be it emotions or something else, you just say, you know what, I'm going to run an experiment, but I'm going to ignore some of the evidence that I'm collecting. I'm going to refuse to collect these inputs over here. Then when you get to that next phase of logic and reason, of trying to analyze it,
yeah,
you might not come up with an accurate conclusion because you've not included all of the inputs. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I'd have to think about that. Before I continue, it's not Christopher, but it's Chris, right?
Yeah, either one. Either one works. Okay. My given name, was Christopher, but people typically call me Chris. I go by Chris.
Okay, so it's Chris Stefanick, and you can be found at choiceconversations.libsyn.com. That's libsyn.com. Judgment,
right.
Responsibility you had with Daryl Becker and Wes Bertrand. That's what Vince just posted in the chat room. People can go there if they go to ucy.tv, click on the chat link, and join the people there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me think a little bit about that including emotions. I would say that when you're trying to find out what the human experience is about, that, you'd have to include emotions. But if you're going to try to make an argument for some claim, then, emotions are not used to come at some kind of truth, right?
Right. Well, let's make the distinction between the subjective and the objective.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to come to an objective truth, in many areas, you might need to remove emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're having a conversation with someone, one thing you should be asking yourself is, what am I trying to get out of this conversation? And then the next thing you should be asking yourself after you got into that question are the methods I'm using for communicating with them effective in getting out of the conversation what I'm trying to get out of it? So, if you're trying to prove some, theory of economics or, some new law of physics or something like that,
Yeah.
you're going to need to remove subjectivity
Yes.
in order to make a convincing case.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I say that, but then again, some of the most convincing cases, the people that are masters of rhetoric, are very much play under emotions. So, again, I guess it depends on what it is you're trying to do. So, logical fallacies, I know, are identifying logical fallacies that you're receiving from others is a very big part of the trivium as far as, the logic component.
Yeah.
But there are many who would argue that when you're using rhetoric to deliver your message,
Yeah.
using logical fallacies on others are very effective at delivering your message. I personally am not a big subscriber to that, but I can see the effectiveness that others have in it. I mean, all you have to do is turn on any politician and listen to them speak, and then watch the crowd cheering as they deliver one fallacy after another to see that fallacies can be very effective as rhetoric.
Yeah. All right. Vince, anything you want to add?
Well, let's see here. I'm in the middle of this and that. Yeah, let me mute 1 second. I have to plug in over here. Let me grab my notebook here. It's just out of reach, and I would like to read a little bit what I did take notes on. I'll be right back.
All right, buddy. So, Chris, can you tell me a little bit about these 4 Ds?
Sure. So the 4 Ds of disconnected communication, we already mentioned diagnosing. So that's saying things like, what's wrong with you? Don't you realize that, how much of an asshole you're being right now? Or, you're diagnosing them to be an asshole. Or even just the, boy, you're really angry.
Yeah.
And you're being real aggressive right now, and these are all diagnoses, and they tend to make people defensive. So that's why they say, Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, said, if you want to be effective in your communication, if you want to connect with others, try to avoid using diagnosis.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is clear to me. Try to avoid using diagnosis. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, go ahead.
So I think many of us, our purpose in social media, like I was saying when we started out, is we set out to affect a change in the world. And like I said, as for me, I found mostly that it was I that was changed. And, the greatest part of that, actually, right here to UCY.TV, this is where I spend most of my time. There's so many great hosts here that are presenting their idea of truth. And with that, I'll go to my notes. And perhaps we don't actually have opposite views, but dissimilar ideas. And when expressing our likes or dislikes, it's kind of our natural tendency. Again, I'll go back to, this nurture versus nature. Now, it's been expressed as a jackal versus giraffe expression in language. And as I said, we tend to learn from our environment in expressing ourselves, and that is revealed in a fight or flight. So that scenario of fight or flight. So if we're confronting somebody and we're using a violent, in a sense, we're trying to force them into our way of thinking, then we do nothing more than drive a wedge. So we're being very counterproductive when we're not taking into consideration that point in time where a person may be coming from. Whether they feel like they're a predator or a prey. Some people call trolls or shills or whatever. So judgment of what is or against us by mythology or how we perceive these evaluations. We can look at this as a diagnosis or a treatment or how we proceed. Take a look at for example, the straw in the camel, and how much do we apply? If we overload that camel, that one final straw will break its back. All need agree to proceed to avoid disconnect and an observation of truly what of the whys of one's expression. Not like I said. That goes back into the 4Ds of disconnect. And we can see warning signs. So what we want to do is have a voluntary communication. We create our feelings based on our desires, our wants, based on what you observe and what you value. So beyond that physical needs, we have emotional needs and intellectual needs and so on. That it goes beyond the mere, physicality of it. So with diagnoses, we in treatment, we make a plan in our communication.
All right.
Understanding then how to proceed with harmony, equity, and justice. NVC is not just an axiom, but it's used as an application. And those 4Ds of the NVC are diagnosis, denial, that's denial of responsibility, and demands or needs, and deserve-oriented language.
Okay. So back to step one. What was it again? The first D you mentioned?
The first D is diagnosis.
Yeah, diagnostics. Yeah. So when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I am trying to convince them that 9/11 was not done by some crazy people from Afghanistan, and they say, well, no, it was Osama bin Laden, and that sounds like he feels attacked, right?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because before we end the broadcast today, I wanted to take the stand as a person that accepts what's commonly believed by most people, and as far as government and the 9/11. So a little later on, I want to take that and let you kind of wear me out a little bit as far as that perceived ideology and notion.
Yeah, but hold on, I haven't made my point yet. My question is then, well, if I'm going to talk about 9/11, then I'm obviously attacking his view. He's going to get upset. Should I therefore then not talk about it? Because that's not an option for me, right? How do we solve this problem? How do you be non-violent when somebody feels attacked if they try to defend the government standpoint on who did 9/11? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe we can get through this with a role play. So I could pretend to be the person demonstrating like NVC, and you could be someone that is a believer in the official narrative.
All right.
Now, I'll try. This will be difficult for me because the truth movement and all of that, the 9/11 truth movement is not something I tend to spend a lot of effort on, but nonviolent communication is. So would you want to try that? Do a little quick role play?
Sure.
All right. So, and forgive me, I'm talking to Vincent, and who's the other gentleman?
Walter.
Volver?
Walter.
Yeah.
Walter.
Yes, he's over in the Netherlands right now, and it's coming up on about 5 o'clock in the evening over there. Across, and I kind of made a little fun with the post in here into chat. And if you're listening downstream, be sure to come back to ucy.tv/news or chat. You can join in the conversation. You'll find some great stimulating conversation there, as well as some that might piss you off. So, hey, go on, Chris, and I'm interested in hearing this role play.
All right. So, Walter.
Hi.
I'm really interested in talking to you about 9/11 and the official story and some things I've discovered about it. Would you be willing to have a conversation with me about that?
Well, what's there to conversate about? I mean, hasn't the government already figured out what happened? And, there's the 9/11 Commission report and the NIST report and all that.
Well, I've done a lot of research, and I found a lot of inconsistencies in those reports, which are pretty troubling to me.
Oh.
And would you be willing to take the time to review the inconsistencies, and we can then see, see what you think then? I mean, because I'm finding a hard time believing the official story.
Oh, what's wrong with it?
All right, well, then I would proceed to give you some of the details. Like I said, I'm not well versed in all the details, but
it's okay.
I am very versed, by the way.
I'll give you some statistics on how it was a controlled demolition or something like that.
Okay, so you're saying these buildings were rigged with explosives?
Well, there is evidence that I'm just pointing out to you that seems to point in that direction.
Okay, well that's...
It certainly seems to conflict with what the official narrative is.
Yeah, well, because that's strange, because I can't imagine hijackers planting explosives all over the place. So, who would have done that then? Well,
that's a good question. I personally am not sure who did it. There are some nice theories out there.
Uh-huh.
What I do know is that the official story certainly appears to be false. The powers that be are covering up something. I don't know what it is they're covering up, but they're covering up something. And that seems pretty clear to me. Just like I'm not sure who killed JFK, but I'm pretty sure that the official story is not accurate.
Okay. You're confusing me. I mean, if it's not the Muslim terrorists, then who is it?
So, Walter, before we continue the role play, is this typically how people respond to you when you're talking to them, or do they respond differently? Because what I want you to do is respond to how people respond to you. Not like all cordially, and they're like, "That's ridiculous. You're full of shit." That's what they do. That's what I'm wanting to see. But
crazy coke, you.
Yeah, actually, okay. So, what most people, they look at me strangely and they say, "I don't want to hear about it."
All right. So if you, I'm assuming I could see you. You looked at me strangely and said, "I don't want to hear about it."
Yeah.
So the NBC response to that would be, So you don't want to talk about this. It seems to me that you're a little uncomfortable right now. Maybe because, and see, this is one of the parts that could be a struggle, is if you're trying to identify what are the needs of the other person.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just don't know. So in this case, okay, why would they be uncomfortable talking about this, challenging their beliefs? And
it's
I guess at this point I would just extrapolate it into something like, if they can't trust the government in something like this, then that's the first domino. How many other dominoes fall if that first one goes down? If you accept, okay, we cannot trust the government, a whole bunch of dominoes fall besides just that first one.
Yeah, that's exactly why they don't want to hear about it, because they have such a belief in government.
Right. So what I would...
Yeah.
So what I would say is, I could see, I hear that you're telling me you don't want to talk about this. You seem uncomfortable about it. Is that because if the story were false, if what I was saying was true, then you wouldn't feel very secure in a world that's where the governing people, the people with all the guns and all the money, are lying to you. Is that why you would? Or is that accurate? Are you feeling uncomfortable about that?
Let me try and formulate a response here. I guess if you're correct, right? I know that you're correct, and my guess is that if you confront people with that they're shut down even more. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting theory. One way to find out would be to test it and see what happens. So, NBC, it's whenever you get to these things where you're talking with someone and there's a disconnection.
Yeah.
When there's a disconnection, at that point, well, how I found NBC to be useful is at this point you're not talking about anymore. I'm done talking about 9/11.
Yes.
I'm now talking about them.
Yes.
And getting to know them, because until I get past what this is,
okay,
there's no way that I can convince them about 9/11.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time. So at this point, I'm just trying to connect with them and get to know them and build a bridge of empathy to them.
Yeah.
And so with NBC, what you're trying to do is you're trying to put yourself in their shoes and, give them empathy. See, I really want to understand where you're coming from, Walter. I really value your friendship. I see that this reaction you had where you feel uncomfortable. I'd like to understand where it is you're coming from, So, I mean, that's what at that point, you're no longer in the mode of trying to convince them of 9/11 or anything. You're then just trying to connect with them and understand their position.
Yeah.
If you get to that point where they really feel like you understand their position, you may then be able to go back.
Yeah.
And give their arguments. After you say, boy, thank you for sharing that with me, Walter. I really now understand where you're coming from and why you were hesitant there, why you didn't want to talk about that, and I could completely understand your position.
Yeah, in that way you are even piercing beyond the emotion and finding the cause of the emotion, right?
Right. And so then what you could say is, now that I've taken that time to understand where you're coming from,
yeah,
would you be willing to take the time to understand where I'm coming from and try to see my side?
Yeah.
And just see what happens. So, I mean, otherwise, I'm not saying like NBC is a panacea and that this is going to instantly allow you to be able to convince everyone that 9/11 was pulled off by the CIA or Israel or whatever, but I found it as a more effective way of communicating with others than not using it, than using the 4Ds, which is what it was doing beforehand.
Uh-huh.
So, the goal is to be more effective in all areas of our life, right?
Yeah.
So I found nonviolent communication was one area where I can improve my effectiveness when connecting with others.
Choicecommunications.ca, is that yours?
No. So if you just Google Choice Conversations.
Choice.
My bad.
Conversations.
I dropped in communications. It's conversations.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
All right, conversations.
Freudian slip there.
Because we've gathered some more. This is the one. Some more.
Yeah, if you just do Choice Conversations in Google.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember the URL or anything. I just did it right now. I mean, the first several are all me, and even the ones, basically everything on the first page of Google is me.
Yeah.
Even if it's a link to somebody else's website, it's somebody else's website interviewing me.
Yeah.
So that's the best way to find me is just do a search for Choice Conversations, and I'll come right up. If you do a search for Chris Stefanick, you're going to find a Catholic priest who's very popular in the media.
Oh,
not me.
Okay.
So search for Choice Conversations. Don't search for Chris Stefanick.
Yeah, choiceconversations.libsyn, that's libsyn.com. Because we had some new people joining the radio, listening to the radio, and they wanted to know who you were. I got that from the...
And Chris, I had an earlier question. Have you been on Live Free FM with Nathan Frazier here simulcasting at UCY Sunday night?
Could you repeat the question?
Have you been on with Nathan Frazier on Live Free FM? Was a question earlier. I know you know Daryl Becker, and Daryl Becker's been a frequent guest with Nathan. And he, and a few others have kind of the same inflection or tone in your voice, and I think I accredit that to the non-aggressive form of communication and lack of perhaps accent. Unlike me, I think I have a little bit of an accent. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, I'm not from North Carolina originally, in case you didn't notice. So, originally from Ohio.
And there's a lot of rednecks in Ohio.
There are. So I actually grew up on a farm, hunting, fishing, trapping, all that. So, but people in Ohio, well, in general, if you go to the cities in Ohio, people talk like you would hear people talk on television. So that's generally considered to be no accent in America. If you're talking like the people on television talk, they don't have an accent. If you go to the people in the country, now sometimes they will have a little bit of a country twang to them, but not anything like down here in the South.
Okay, Dan McKinstry dropped in that some of your technique appears to be what is taught in criminal justice course of interrogation techniques, but he says you're downplaying the importance of the situation and being sympathetic and non-judgmental. Sounds like you're trained in soft interrogation methods. Well, to that I say, keep up, please, Dan Cooper. Scroll back in chat. Check out some of the links. I dropped, I think, quite a few through there, and I'm being a little aggressive in how I'm saying that now. So, what we're trying to say here is how we might communicate with one another. The nonviolent communication has been associated with Marshall Rosenberg, who has been associated with this other guy, and these MK Ultra, mind control, and all this. Now, if you go back to, I believe it's on Tragedy and Hope, where Daryl Becker and a couple others are criticized by the host there, including John Irving, saying that you guys are shills, in a sense, for us to this method of communication. And as I had earlier, I found myself evolving to this point without even knowing, first of all, the trivium or nonviolent communication or non-aggression type of trying to convey information and ideas. And when you piss somebody off, they quit listening, and the emotion takes over, and it just spirals out of control. And if you want to have a part in affecting change in this world, then you're going to have to be able to communicate effectively, and that's why I titled this "More Effective Communication."
All right.
And Hopper's confused, so what are you confused about, Hopper? And let me hand it back to you, and if you'll address that, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Vince.
Yes.
Let me welcome the Ochelli. Hi, buddy. How you doing?
All right. How you doing, Walter? Can you hear me okay?
Fine, thank you. You're on with Chris and Vince.
Good evening. Good afternoon for those of us in America, but good morning anyway. Good evening to you, though. You know what I'm sitting here and wondering, listening to all this conversation, is, the majority of people are not reached in this way, or not reached in this logical way, okay? It seems to me as though they are only brought into conversations by their own fear, by their own need to elevate their own self-image, and by their own greed or their own desire to benefit. It seems to me that this is the primary motivators for individuals, and of course this is exactly what the advertising industry has utilized on us for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, you can't even make someone enter a conversation intellectually with all of these techniques, and it's very nice for someone who is actually going to engage. But in order to make someone engage in the first place, this is the difficulty. And I think that was kind of pointed out when you were sitting there, Walter, saying, well, generally what will happen is somebody will say, oh, I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
That's really a key there, because most people just say, look, that's nonsense. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
You're speaking nonsense, which is their defense for not engaging.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the end of the conversation, realistically, right? So all of these techniques are for naught unless you can cause someone to initiate the conversation, gentlemen. I mean, what do you think of that?
Chris? Can I answer that?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So, a wise man once said to me that, he's like, I've never convinced anyone of anything. He said, all I do is talk to people that have already convince themselves. And what he kind of meant by that was, if you're trying to change someone's mind, you're wasting your time. In general, people,
Right.
Yes, it can happen. I would say it's maybe less than 1% of people that you can actually change their mind if they don't want their mind to be changed. But in general, trying to change someone's mind isn't going to work. They're going to get defensive. They're not interested in having their mind changed. It's a waste of time. So, if we have a limited amount of time on this planet, you need to realize, okay, should I spend my time on something that's a waste of time, that's maybe a less than 1% odds of success, or spend it where there's a chance of success? So if you can find somebody who's open-minded, who maybe hasn't made up their mind yet, that's an area where you can present the evidence and have the discussion. Or, of course, if you've already found somebody that's come to that conclusion, you don't really, there's not much to debate. They're already on the same page with you. But so that's, with me, this whole, like, trying to convince people of stuff, I've kind of given up on that game. At this point, like I said on my show, mine is more about freedom of the mind and bringing freedom to your personal life as opposed to political freedom and getting caught up in that, because we have no power in the political arena to make any kind of change. What power do I have to change anything? What power do I have to do anything about what happened with 9/11? I have no power. Even just convincing other people that it's a lie, and having no power beyond that, just saying, look, just the official story isn't true. I don't even have power to that, because people, if they don't want to change their mind, it's probably not going to happen.
Well, that's because.
So, but where do I have power? So I spend my time in, like, my show is when people who want help, I help them, and that's like in their personal life. There are many people come to my show and are like, "Wow, I need some help in my relationships. I need some help in my marriage. I need some help in my job, or being happy and being comfortable in my own skin." And there's a lot of things for people who want to change, who are seeking you out, please give me answers. Then you can be really effective. Then you can really make a positive change in people's life. And you can bring real freedom. You can create real freedom in this world on the personal level. So that's where I spend my efforts. If somebody doesn't believe something, I don't try to change their mind, personally. And the only reason I would ever enter into that area is if it's somebody who they're in my life. I don't have a choice about them being in my life, and it's something that's very important. So an example of that would be, I'm married and I have a daughter. Mm-hmm. If my wife was like, we need to send our daughter to public school, and there's no reason to waste money on sending them to a private school. I know you like that private school, that it's much more respectful to children and the like, but that's a waste of money. Well, I can't say, okay, well, that's fine. Well, I'm going to send my daughter there anyway. And I'm in this relationship already, and it's very important, the outcome of it. So, because it's going to have a big effect on my daughter's life. So at that point, I would sit down and I'd be like, okay, I need to use all my skills of communication to try to make my case and connect with my wife. But the thing is, I would really need to connect with her first on why she feels that way, and try to sense what are the emotions here that are causing her to be resistant to going to a private school. That before, if I just try to argue over it without addressing the underlying needs that are going on, maybe she's uncomfortable because she went to public schools, and if we discover that these private schools are a lot better than the schools that she went to, that maybe it was not a very nurturing environment that she went through, that makes her very uncomfortable to feel like, gee, in my childhood I was in a bad school or whatever. This is all just hypothetical, by the way.
So
if I don't address that, I'm never going to be able to convince her to do something better for our daughter.
You have trouble hearing us, Chris?
Sorry, go ahead.
I think there's a lag, Ochelli.
Oh, there's a lag. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was trying to ask a question, actually. That I understand what you're saying about the inertia okay, that is inherent in people's own personal trajectories, where it comes down to if it's a personal prejudice based on who they are or where they're coming from. That makes perfect sense. I get that. And of course, the person who told you that trying to change someone's mind and all that, there's no such thing. You can quote me on this. There's no such thing as an open-minded person anyway, so that's irrelevant. But the thing is, when we're talking about changing somebody's direction or whatever else, you're trying to engage in a conversation. Okay, just a conversation, not necessarily to change their point of view or anything else, but to simply make a presentation for consideration. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yes, the analysis of one's personal belief system, what it is rooted in, and all of that can be extremely useful. But when you're talking about reaching out to individuals that you have no information on, stuff like that, wouldn't you agree that essentially those three things that I outlined here are essentially the only way to even initiate a conversation most of the time?
Well, what the first question is, going back to what I was saying earlier, what is it you're trying to get out of the conversation? So ask yourself that. So when you go to initiate these conversations, why are you even bothering? There are a million other things you could do. What specifically are you trying to get out of it?
You may just be compelled to have the conversation, to examine your own side of the issue, let's just say. Use someone else as a sounding board. How about that?
Okay. So then you're not trying to convince them. You're just wanting to use them as a sounding board.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is a lot of times you don't even wind up engaging in anything resembling a conversation because there is not only a defensive sort of nature to it based on a philosophical reasoning, but in a lot of cases, there's just no way to initiate the conversation to begin with unless you seize upon these very base sort of needs. Like I said, they've been sort of boiled down by the advertising industry rather effectively, right? This is how they engage. You didn't even know you were hungry till you saw the stupid food commercial, right? That's what I'm saying. It's one of these situations. So when you're going in cold and you don't necessarily know the person you're trying to engage with in a conversation. I mean, what are you saying? Okay, so why are you bothering engaging in a conversation with someone you don't know? I mean, is that what you're saying?
All right. Or? So the first question is, why am I doing this? So what am I trying to get out of it? So your answer is, well, I just want a sounding board to see if my ideas are sound. So I would initiate the conversation by saying, hey, you know what? I heard this interesting theory. I've seen this evidence about 9/11. And, I just need to talk about it with somebody to see if it's sound. Would you be okay with me talking to you about this a little bit and just bouncing the ideas off of you, and you can give me your feedback?
Well,
so that's the first question. The second question. Yeah. The second question is, hear me out.
Permission, but asking for permission doesn't breach the thing I'm talking about.
No. Hear me out. The second thing. The second question you ask, the first one is, what am I trying to get out of this? The second one is what I'm doing effective for me to get out of this, what I'm trying to get out of it? So you ask for permission, and they say, I don't want to talk about this. Okay, you ask yourself, is this going to be an effective conversation, an effective method for me to bounce these ideas off somebody by continuing with this person who said they don't want to talk about it? He was obviously uncomfortable with it. I would say you'd say, no, this is not an effective way to get that done. So you stop. You say, okay, I'm wasting my time. Maybe I can find somebody else. And honestly, I would say, in pretty much, if you can, developing the practice of asking yourself those two questions before you talk to anyone about anything. I mean, outside of pass the salt, what am I trying to get out of this, and is the approach I'm using effective at getting me there? And you'd be amazed how much of the conversation you have in your life is just out of habit, and you're using completely ineffective methods you get out of the conversation what it is you're trying to get out of it.
Well, I have a little bit of trouble with what the first question, like what am I trying to get out of it? I don't speak to people because I want to get something out of it. I've already come to certain conclusions. I don't need to bounce them off somebody else. And I know that, like you said, most people don't want to hear. And so is then the conclusion that nonviolent communication is useless in most cases? Because, well, if they don't want to talk about it, you find somebody else. But, only 1 in 100 is willing to talk. So what's this nonviolent communication good for then?
See, that's what I was taking away from it too, Walter, is that, look, if you wish to engage in a conversation, let's just say your motive is not to have a sounding board, but let's just say your motive is to simply give away information.
Exactly.
You actually have a giving desire to give away information.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so some people are going to refuse to be reached unless you've utilized one of these techniques to get at one of those baser instincts in a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was the point I was trying to make anyway. But here's the thing. If you choose your opponents, listen, you could be the heavyweight champion of the world so long as you only fight out-of-shape fat guys, and that's all your opponents, right? You know what I'm saying? If it comes down to choosing the individuals that you engage with, well, that's fine and that's dandy, but that doesn't allow you to operate on a larger scale, let's just say, and disseminate information on a greater platform, does it? It doesn't let you give that away to as many people as you can, right? So, what about that? What about if your motive is simply to give away this information, this enlightenment that you've gained? I mean, for instance, let's just take these techniques that you have right now. You want to be able to give these away to people so that they can have smoother communications in their life. Well, if somebody's not even willing to listen to this, what do you do then? You haven't engaged them in the conversation, and what good is it? I mean, the most brilliant idea in the world is, if it is the thing that could save mankind, but nobody ever gets to hear it, you've got a problem, don't you? I don't know. Maybe that's just the way I'm taking it, and it seems adversarial. I'm not trying to be adversarial. I was just trying to see what the solution for that would be.
So let me see if I can figure out what your claim is. You're saying that
I'm not making a claim. I'm making a for instance here, but yeah.
So if you're wanting to share information,
yeah,
the need here would be sharing information. And this is pretty much regardless. You want to share this information regardless of whether people want to hear it or not. Then nonviolent communication is not a good tool for you. Is that what you're saying?
Okay.
Let me weigh in real quick.
Sure.
May I? I don't think Chuck's saying that at all. I think he's agreeing with the premise that in order, and then like Daryl Becker says, in order to be able to reach out and engage people, we have to build bridges. So when we come to a point where somebody refuses to listen because it contradicts with their idea of the world, then it's a shutdown. So what we have to do is be able to approach, be able to determine what a person's wants and needs are, and not physical needs, but their actual emotional needs, because all the big issues today are highly volatile, highly emotional subjects. When it comes to 9/11, the idea of government ruling by force. So, and Chuck, the blind JFK researcher, a lot of people have so many theories on this that for instance, that is a lot of people that have an ideology other than what Chuck's conspiracy theory, and I hate that word. It's more facts, but they're going to be more apt to shut down and not hear what he says because they believe what they believe, or obviously they believe something else, not what he believes. Is that correct, Chuck?
Well, yeah. What I'm saying is that if you can't engage in the conversation, what is the sense of the rest of it? So what about, what is the technique here that is in line with nonviolent communication in order to just begin to engage in that conversation when you have that sort of resistance? I mean, is just the answer to move on and, wait for those who are seeking that conversation to come to you? That's really what the question I guess I'm asking overall.
Yeah, good question. Because, if non-violent communication cannot be used on 99% of the population, then, what use is it, especially if the 1% that's left, you're already more probable to have a good conversation with because you're more on the same level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's two things being confused here.
Okay.
So there's nonviolent communication, and then there is what I proposed, which is not nonviolent communication, but it is just before you speak, what am I trying to get out of this interaction, and is this an effective way to get that?
Okay.
So that has nothing to do with that part. Like, is this an effective way to get that? Has nothing to do with nonviolent communication.
Okay.
If you're going to disregard those questions and just say, you know what, I'm hell-bent on telling this person all about 9/11, then to use nonviolent communication, when you started seeing resistance, when you started seeing them express emotion, you would then connect with them and build that bridge of empathy. This is not, nonviolent communication can be used with, I'll fall short of saying it can be used with everyone, at least effectively with everyone, but it can be used with a lot more than just 1% of the population. You would then just connect. Like I said, you would need to get down to that level of, okay, I can see you're uncomfortable with this. Yeah. And I really value this conversation with you. Can we, is it okay if we explore that and see why makes you uncomfortable? So just having that curiosity and that wanting to connect and that wanting to understand their position and get to the root of why they feel that way, you're just not going to if you try to ignore that, you're going to have zero effect at all. So you might as well not even do it at all. But if you are going to ignore it, then you have a chance at then connecting with the person, sure. I think it's the only chance you have, is to not ignore that cognitive dissonance that's not allowing them to think rationally about it, that's not allowing them to even entertain evidence.
And you mean denial, not cognitive dissonance, I think. Cognitive dissonance is a strange feeling that you get when you are confronted with facts that contradict the story that you believe in your head. That's something else than denial, right?
Well, I would say I think that cognitive dissonance fits perfectly with the reaction most people give you when you start talking about the 9/11 truth movement.
Denial. I think it fits rather well together.
Whatever. Whichever way you want to look at it. I don't want to get caught up in semantics.
No,
I think you know what it is I'm trying to say.
But I would like to. I think there's a difference between cognitive dissonance. Most people in the what's called the alternative media, they use that as a kind of negative term, but actually it's a very positive thing. If you recognize in yourself that there is cognitive dissonance, in other words, that a feeling arises of confusion, of contradiction, when confronted with ideas or words or facts that do not go in line with what you're thinking, then that's a point where you should start investigating. And that's something else than denial. That also happens with a lot of people. And that's when you get, I don't want to talk about it, right?
So to me, I view denial as a type of cognitive dissonance. Rightly or wrong, maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's not true, but I've always viewed denial as this is just one flavor of cognitive dissonance.
All right.
Yes, some flavors of cognitive dissonance are chocolate, some are vanilla. This one's butter pecan.
All right.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not accurate. And if so, forgive me. But
it's all right. So
what I mean is, what I'm trying to say is, so we don't get caught up on the words and we get the meaning. What I'm trying to say is, when you engage someone with these topics that make them uncomfortable, you need to address what it is in their mind get to the root cause of what it is in their mind that's causing them to be uncomfortable about it. And if you ignore that, you're not going to have any chance of connecting with them. Would be what the nonviolent communication approach is, which would be to empathize with them and try to really get to that root cause and understand it and see it through their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to come in for a moment, if I may.
Go ahead, Vince.
Thank you. Danby Cooper, and he dropped in about Rosenberg. Now this is where the conflict comes in for a lot of people that are opposing the use of, and let me put these air quotes out there, the NVC, nonviolent communication method. There's generally about 8 points there that people take, and not, like I said, not as a religion, but as a guide. Now, we can certainly agree with some points with some people and not necessarily agree with their ideology. I mean, take social Marxism, for example. I mean, I don't think very many can disagree with the fact that there would certainly be a good idea somewhere involved in there. But that doesn't mean you have to be a communist or a socialist or a Marxist-Leninist. We all have our own ideas, and what we hope to do here is be able to take what's good and go through and weigh the evidence, look at the language, take the who, what, and where, bring the why in, and then we can understand how. So this doesn't only include instances of social media when we're trying to bring about supposed truths of how the world works. It should also be applied, and more aptly be applied, in relationships. So with this building this bridge, we're building relationships, and that can be applied in everyday life to your friend, your neighbor, your spouse, or somebody else. You know, if we want to have true engagement, if we want to be if we want to affect change in the world, then we have to be the change that we want to see. So as long as we're still going with this left-right paradigm, we play right into the age-old idiom of divide and conquer. So it's what we're hoping to do, is to be able to create a more effective communication skill. Okay?
All right. Chris.
Yes.
What's the second D?
I'm not sure that the order is important, but one of them is demands.
Demands. All right. What am I supposed to get? What's with this demands? What is it?
So a demand would be when you insist that somebody else does something, change their behavior, etc.
All right. That's a problem.
Right. In this, if you demands, people become defensive.
Yeah.
And you are much less likely to have a pleasant interaction and to connect with the other person. You're basically it's going to force a wedge between your connecting with that person.
Yeah. You want to basically avoid demands, right? You want to avoid diagnostics, but then you want to get to the root cause of why people are feeling uncomfortable, right? So that's kind of using diagnostics, right?
Well, let me weigh in real quick. Excuse me, Chris.
Sure.
You don't have to point out another person's demands. It's more important to identify them for yourself.
No.
And
Vince,
you don't have to point out the other person's fallacies necessarily. And when you do, you usually cause disconnect. So let me just add that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you sit there and say to somebody, well, you're really being a jackal right now, first of all, that's not nonviolent communication. That's making a diagnosis. So you're absolutely not using, when you point out to other people how they are not using nonviolent communication or how they're using fallacies and the like, that's not necessarily nonviolent communication.
All right.
And the big
Certainly.
no-no word is you should.
Right. So
Yeah.
should is another one of the D's. I would
Yeah.
say that's deserve oriented thinking. So you want to, if possible, remove deserve. So deserve is you should, you ought to,
Uh-huh.
and it's very much caught up in the realm of punishment and rewards.
Yeah.
Like you should be punished when you do bad things. You should be rewarded when you do good things.
Yeah.
And it leads to disconnection
Uh-huh.
when you go down those roads.
But one step back, the demands. If I
Sure.
initiate a conversation with somebody, it should be me not having the demands, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not
other
the
people are not going to speak nonviolent communication to you.
Yeah.
They're going to make demands. They're going to make diagnoses. They're going to
Yeah.
use deserve-oriented thinking, and
So, but
there's not much you can do about that.
yeah. So, but then that doesn't mean that if I initiate the conversation and I notice that somebody is using a logical fallacy, I should be able to point that out, right?
You can.
That's not.
Note that when you do point it out, though,
Yeah.
quite often there's going to be an emotional response. And when there's an emotional response, if what you're trying to get out of it is connection with the other person, then that's when you then go into nonviolent communication and say, I see whenever I was pointing out that you were using a red herring there,
Yeah.
that you became angry or you got frustrated. Is there? And then you try to explore that and get to the need underneath.
Yeah. And the third one was deserves.
Deserve-oriented language.
Yeah, that's I have very much trouble connecting those words together. Deserve-oriented language. It's just a blur to me. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. Let's see. So, if I say to my daughter, I come in, I walk in the door and her stuff's all over the floor.
Yeah.
And I say, I can't believe you left all this stuff all over the floor. Let me think of what a good example of this would be. I'm drawing a blank right now.
No
So
problem.
basically saying, you deserve to be punished for this. You should have cleaned this stuff up.
Yeah.
I don't know, Vincent, do you have any better examples for me? I'm sorry, I'm not coming up with a very good example at this moment.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I was going back to the grammar, and I keep going back to Daryl Becker. I did a lot of listening to Daryl Becker this past week.
Yeah.
And he gave a real good example of, and this goes back to the trivium. So without the trivium, I think really this non-aggressive form of communication really is probably about worthless, because without identifying the components, and he used an example of building a fire. Your kindling, the varying sizes of wood, all up to build this fire. So all these sticks and wood and kindling and all that are all components. All these are language, and so that brings us to the why. So what type of fire are we building? Are we building a one to cook or heat with, or to send a signal, or to we want to hold that fire over smoldering for when we come back, and then we come down from the grammar into the why, the rhetoric, and then the logic is how. So all these depend
the logic is
one upon another.
why, Vince. The logic
Yes.
is why, and the rhetoric is how.
Okay, I put it backwards. Sorry. Thank you.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But-
So
With this deserve-oriented language, I'm still not seeing the connection here.
okay, deserve-oriented relation is look, I cleaned up my room. I deserve a cookie. I deserve praise. I deserve raising my allowance, using Chris's example of he and his daughter.
Yeah.
Now, some things are naturally just expected, and there's type of obligation involved, and so you don't necessarily deserve anything just because you've done this, and that's probably not even really a good example either. Is what I suggest somebody do there in chat is go and use your search engine and pull up the 4Ds of NVC, and I think Becky pulled those up earlier, and take a look right there. Maybe you can add in here in chat, and we'll share your idea. Or if you're listening live, call in 718-717-8296, and a little later down the line when this goes to archive, it hits up to YouTube. I'll be adding this archive to the post. I know there's going to be some listeners on down the line, and again, the whole purpose of me doing what I do is to bring people back here and to engage in conversation. And we take this side, one side or another, and we don't allow another to express themselves, then we're pretty much pointless.
All right.
And if we're, go ahead,
Chris. So deserve-oriented language. I understand, like, if you say to your daughter who hasn't cleaned up her room, you should have cleaned up your room. That's, I guess, a way of saying it, right? It's the way in which you tell your daughter that she should have cleaned up her room. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so if you say, you should clean up your room, or you owe it to me to clean up your room, don't you know how hard I work to keep this roof over your head?
Yeah.
And this is the best you can do with this room I provided for you?
Yeah.
If you're not, don't you deserve to be punished for not doing this, or you owe it to me to do this?
Yeah.
I deserve for you to take care of this house.
Ah, okay. So it's the initiator of the conversation that feels he deserves something. Is that correct?
Right.
And
right.
that's what should be avoided, I guess.
Right. And the underlying principle behind deserve-oriented language is that people should be rewarded and they should be punished. They should be rewarded when they're good little boys and girls, and punished when they're bad little boys and girls.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of studies showing that is not very healthy and not very effective, actually. If you're trying to get somebody to do something, to guilting them into doing it, you might get compliance in the short term, but to reach your long-term goals, it's typically not very effective to use
it reminds me of Pavlovian ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's take an example from UFDA, or a.k.a. ACAC, in chat. Let me put him on the spot. He says, sounds like Jews speak to me, and I'm not exactly sure to what he's referring there, but I know a lot of people have, concrete ideas of what the ills are in this world. So what would that be when somebody says, sounds like Jews speak to me?
Well, that's because of the last name, Rosenberg, of course.
Well, yeah. Can I ask a question to Chris? What? Let me ask you something. What is in your opinion? Okay, are you saying that fear is not an effective communication method? I mean, fear is not something to be utilized for effective communication, you think, or what?
Well, again, what are you trying to get out of the interaction? If you're trying to get out, if you want connection with the person, if you want a strong relationship with the person, I would say that no, fear is not an effective way to get there.
Even if it's mutual somehow. Even if it's mutual somehow.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by mutual.
Well, okay.
I mean, there might be some, like, if what you're desiring is them to cower before you and submit, then I'd say fear is probably pretty effective. That's
right.
So again, you have to ask yourself what it is I'm trying to get out of this.
Oh no, I understand, but you're trying to affect a response, right? In the example you're using for the kids, okay, and trying to effectively get them to do something, okay, based on your communication. So you're looking to affect a response, right?
Well, that depends. If you're looking for compliance in the short term, fear and punishments are an effective way of doing that. I personally, I'm taking a longer-term view where I'm saying my goal as a parent is not to have obedience and compliance in the short term. My goal as a parent is to guide my daughter to become a strong, confident, independent woman. And part of that is I absolutely do not want her to just submit and obey to authority figures in her life. That's setting her up to be a slave to the state, a slave to the church, a slave to bullies on the playground, a slave to, teachers, whatever. To be obedience is in parenting. People talk about obedience like this is some great thing, some high virtue, but it's not. It's just absolutely not. That's the thing. Is so how do you get your child? And even that language is not really good language to use. How do I get my child to do things that I want them to do when without compelling them, without force, without demanding that they obey me, and using fear and things of that nature? Because I know that those things are going to damage the relationship, and they're only going to give me compliance in the here and now. When I'm not around, my daughter might pick up the stuff right now, the whole time resenting me and muttering under her breath what an asshole father she's got.
Yeah.
Is that when I'm not around, is she going to then be wanting to do the things I say? She's going to be looking to, because she resents what she's having to do, because of the methods I used, she's going to be looking for how can she get around me? How can she avoid me in the future and things of that nature? Rather than building a relationship of respect where she really respects me, we have mutual respect for each other. We both want the other person's needs to be met, because we both care about the other person, we both respect the other person. And so then when she realizes that her actions are impacting my needs, she will self-regulate and modify her behavior, not because she fears me, but because she generally wants my needs to get met too. She wants to live in a house where there's peace. She wants me to be happy, because she knows that I want her to be happy, and we work together so that everybody's needs get met.
Well, see, that also doesn't allow her to be prepared for what she's going to be confronted with later. See, this is where I have this conflict as a parent myself personally. Okay, and you are the authority figure. I mean, what else are you supposed to be? You're supposed to have a relationship with your child. You kind of have to walk a line, right? So you are an authority figure at the same time. You want that relationship, so it seems to be in conflict with one another. But then again, I don't think so, because occasionally utilizing these things that they're going to be confronted with later in life is nothing more than a proving ground, actually, where they have safety as opposed to suffering consequences for it. Now, when they begin to stretch out of that mold and they start to rebel, etc., this is part of the natural process, hopefully. You've instilled that in them. You've instilled rebellion in them as an authority figure as well. So this is where you kind of have to deal with it from a dual sort of purpose in my mind. Okay? And in this case, again, the nonviolent communication, it leaves them completely unprepared for what they're going to be dealing with among the majority of the population. I mean, this type of dealing with your kids, I don't know. What do you think of that kind of process, in my mind?
Well, that's a theory. Your theory that you're putting forward is raising a child with nonviolent communication leaves them unable to cope with people out in the world who are not using nonviolent communication. Am I stating that correctly? Are you there? Did I lose you?
No, I'm sorry. Something went wrong with my sound for a second there, so I only heard part of what you said.
Okay, so what I think is you're trying to say is if you raise your child with nonviolent communication, they are not going to be prepared to deal with others who are not speaking nonviolent communication.
Well,
is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is they're going to be constantly confronted with people who are not going to give a damn what their position is, how they feel about it, how they're going to take the relationship forward ever after. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Okay, I mean that's the reality of what goes on, unless you're going to live in a very cloistered sort of way, and they're going to be extremely well segregated from the majority of the population in general. That's what you have, right? So, what about preparing them for that as well?
So what you're saying is that's what you're proposing is a theory. That's not fact. What you're proposing. There's no.
Which part are you saying is not fact?
You're proposing that a child that is raised with nonviolent communication is not equipped to deal with people who do not speak nonviolent communication.
Well, if they're conditioned,
true or not true?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, if you're not trained in certain methods of communication, when you're confronted with them, generally speaking, you're not going to understand what's going on. I mean, listen, Russian is a wonderful language, but if I don't speak it and somebody's screaming at me in it, I have no clue what they're saying. You know, and really, this is about how disparate these different types of communication are. That's what I'm proposing. Yeah.
I think we may have lost Chris. I hope he calls back.
Oh, well, I hope I didn't just scare somebody right off your show.
No. I understand your question.
Well, am I out of line? I mean, I honestly, tell me. I mean, am I just like being hot-headed about this, or these are legitimate questions in my mind. They seem to be, you know, when I hear a proposal of a methodology, I say test it. Yeah. Right. And I know that you do that all the time. I listen to you all the time. So I'm aware that you'll say, well, now, wait a minute. This doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is what you do. So, you know, I'm sorry if I offended somebody or something.
No, it's okay. Here. I understand you. At least this is what Chris also does. He reformulates what you're trying to say to get straight in his own mind if that is really what you meant to say, right? And so if I reformulate what you said, it's like if your parents raise you as a child with nonviolent communication, then when stepping into the world, you're going to meet people who don't use that method, and you will not be able to deal with these people, right?
Right, and believe it or not, I mean, I'm speaking from, honestly, personal experience, because, you know, the way that I was raised, you could not describe anything that I was raised in as nonviolent communication. As a matter of fact, violence was communication, the way I was raised. Okay, now, when I went out into the world a bit, I found that that this was not the case with everyone.
Yeah, he's back, by the way.
Good. You know, but when that happened to me, right, that was a bit of a culture shock, okay, because I didn't realize that a normal and natural response, even going into grade school as a kid, I didn't realize that a normal and natural response wasn't when somebody, you know, kind of steps into your own personal space, that you shouldn't just simply knock them down. That was. I mean, really, this is the way I was raised, right?
Yeah.
Now that's completely the opposite of what we're talking about here. But still, there was an adjustment necessary, and it wasn't easy. And it was because of the way that I was sort of conditioned. Yeah. And as parents, we do have a need to condition our children. I mean, I'm a parent myself, right? So I'm saying that you know, that preparedness for your children is absolutely necessary. So you can't completely keep them sheltered from the way the rest of the world communicates. I mean, Walter, like I said, I will absolutely bow to whatever it is you say here and say, okay, I'm sorry, I'll be quiet now. But I mean, I think these are honest questions. That's all.
Yeah, Chris, I think you understood correctly what Ochelli is trying to get across. It's like when, as a child, when your parents raise you with nonviolent communication, you're going to have trouble when stepping out into the world with other people because they don't communicate in this way.
Again, like I said, that's a theory.
Really?
There's you know ways to test that, and you know there are many people that have raised their children this way, and they don't find that to be the case at all. They do just fine, and do much better out in the real world with, jackals and the like.
Okay.
And, it's because you use nonviolent communication, it doesn't mean that, you then can't talk to your child about how other people act in the world and how other people are going to use these techniques, of fear and bullying and the 4Ds, making demands and all this stuff.
Yeah.
You can talk to them about them and prep them for it, and there's no way you're going to be able to shelter them from it. I mean, unless you really lead them in a extremely sheltered life where you're controlling the people that are around them and limiting it to only to people that speak NBC. I mean, that's going to be, in general, you're not going to be able to shelter them from it, so they're going to see it. But then I actually like the analogy to speaking Russian. You said if someone's speaking Russian, you're not going to know what they're saying or whatever.
Yeah.
When a child is raised and treated with respect, and when someone else comes across and they're not speaking that way and they're not treating them with respect and they're making demands and bullying and the like, they're going to seem like somebody that's speaking Russian to them.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. They will see a lot of people who are raised within that paradigm, where that's the norm, where the parents are giving demands and the parents are doing all this stuff all the time. It's natural to them, and so those people don't stand out to them. People that are manipulating them, and people that are abusing them, people that don't respect them, that's just what they're used to. And so it seems natural. And when people do that, they don't see it, and they are much easier to be victims. Where the ones where that's like Russian to them, they see that coming a mile away, and they can adjust, they can act accordingly. They're like, okay, this is one of these people. All right, I know how to deal with these people. I need to, prepare to protect myself or whatever. I mean, somebody like that is never going to be in a job where their boss is very disrespectful to them, because they're just not going to put up with it. They're not going to be in a job where they're miserable because their boss walks all over them, because that's going to seem so foreign to them.
Yeah.
Where so many people today spend their days. I mean, I think in America the statistics are 75% of people hate their jobs in America. And I'm like, can you imagine? You spend the majority of your waking hours someplace doing some activity that you hate.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom it, but yet this is what the majority do. It's because the majority are raised in environments that are not healthy, in environments where whether they're happy or whether they're having a good time, whether their needs are being met, that doesn't matter. They're not respected, and so to them it's just natural that of course people are going to disrespect me. Of course my needs don't matter. Of course I'm going to be miserable. That's just how it is. I don't want that to be the natural state of things.
No.
If I'm a parent.
Yeah, it's a system we are born into, and like Alan Watt says, because your parents don't tell you that this isn't normal, you go on living your life hating your job, right?
I'd like to weigh in. I would say I do agree with Dan that this is a type of manipulation, but manipulating something doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. If you're trying to screw in a light bulb, you have to manipulate it, and that might beg the question how you got in there anyways. Before we close it out, let me just give the big shouts out again. Daryl Becker at Voluntary Visions, Brett Venat, School Subs Project, Chris, our guest today, Choice Conversations, Chuck Ochelli, I love you, Chuck, former host here at UCY and is elsewhere. You can do a search and find him. Somebody I didn't mention is Mark Stevens, and that's M-A-R-C Stevens, Legal Land. You can find a lot because you need to go back into definitions, and this communications we're talking about as far as the grammar is very widespread, whether we're talking about legalese, communicating our information and ideas, or communicating one to another. Also, I'd like to say, hey, thanks, Connie. She's the first one that really challenged me as far as me just being a parrot, and I think she was instrumental in my beginning search of trying to really be able to convey the information that I am trying to convey in a manner that is non-aggressive, because aggression just shuts down the communication. And thanks again, Chris, Chuck, Walter. Thank you for having me on. Thanks to all the listeners now live and downstream. So with that, I'm going to leave it to y'all to close out. Stay tuned for Ron for Game On. He's coming up next, and lots more great radio right here at UCYD.TV. Keep coming back. Yeah.
Vince.
Big love, y'all.
Vince, yes, you're very welcome, but most importantly, I want to tell you, thank yourself also, because you can't wake somebody up. Only people can wake themselves up, right? Remember
Absolutely. That. Absolutely. Love and peace, y'all. I'm hanging up, and I'll let you guys close out. Thanks again, Chris. Looking forward to more conversation with you, brother. And, hey, listen, check out Chief Chris Stefanick on Reverb Nation and on YouTube also. And I like your music, bro. And, Chuck, you guys live pretty close together. I'm going to send you guys a friend request or suggestion. And both you guys are musicians. So, hey, let me hook you guys up. And with that, I'm gone. Love and peace.
Okay, thanks, Vince.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Chris, your website is choiceconversations.libsyn.com, right?
Correct. The best way to find that, the easiest way, is just to do a Google search for Choice Conversations. The first page will all be me.
All right. Well, I thought it was an introduction into this type of communication. The first time I heard it, and I'm still not convinced that it's not a form of neuro-linguistic programming. Mm. You know, I still have my doubts, so to speak. But I'd welcome I'd welcome you coming back on the show and talk about it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I would definitely love to do that.
Yeah, can you come in the chat so we can exchange some contact info? Is that possible for you? Come in the chat room.
Yeah, I'm not in front of a computer right now. Give me a minute.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
But do you have Vincent's contact info?
Yes.
Okay, so he's friends with me on Facebook. We've been chatting there.
Okay, I'll ask him.
You can contact him, or
yeah. I'll contact you via email or something. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, Chris. Thanks a lot for joining.
My pleasure.
And Chucky, how you doing, buddy?
Doing all right, Walter. I really appreciate the shows you do, man. It's really great to hear this stuff discussed in an intelligent manner. And I love the fact that it's being done by somebody who doesn't just speak English. So it's great because the language looks pretty interesting. It's a blunt instrument, the English language, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. How's your child?
Oh, he's doing real well. He's doing real, running full speed and raising hell, really.
Yeah, is he talking already?
He's making noises that seem like communication, but I mean, the running, the climbing, I'm too busy with all that to even notice, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, he's out there, man. Still unvaccinated.
Very nice.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, absolutely, man. So another great show, Walter. I got to applaud you, man. You're always consistently one of the most intellectually well-grounded people I hear doing a show like this. So I absolutely love it, man. And thank you for letting me join in.
You're welcome.
Even though I'm no longer a UCY host.
That's no problem. Thanks a lot for joining, mate.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Take care.
And I want to say thank you to everybody that's still in the chat. Anon is there. Dan, Hopper, Joe, Jules, 3 times now. Matty Clues, Ochelli, Tomato, Victory Through Vegetables, and Vince. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. I'll be back next week. Take care, guys.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific casts.